When NASA publishes animation clips of the Artemis II mission, you see a sleek white spacecraft drifting through the serene darkness of space. The blue Earth glows in the background. The music is inspiring. The astronauts smile at the camera, their faces illuminated by the soft light of monitors. The image is easy to sell. Humanity's return to the moon, a new era of exploration, the next step toward Mars. This image is a beautiful lie. It is not malicious, but it is dangerously incomplete, because the reality of the Artemis II mission is not an elegant flight. It is 10 days of continuous balancing on the brink of catastrophe. It is a journey into an environment where every cubic meter of space is saturated with lethal radiation. It is a place where temperatures fluctuate from plus 120 to minus 150 degrees Celsius. It is a realm where a single technical error does not mean an emergency landing, but a slow death in a metal grave drifting between planets. Over the past 50 years, humanity has flown into space hundreds of times, but every time, we stayed within a narrow safe strip at an altitude of 400 kilometers above the Earth, where the International Space Station is located. This is low Earth orbit. It is still inside the planet's protective magnetic cocoon. This is territory where a rescue capsule can return a crew home in 3.5 hours. Artemis II will leave this cocoon. 4 astronauts will travel a distance of 384,000 kilometers, nearly 1,000 times farther than the ISS. They will cross the Van Allen radiation belts twice. They will spend days in a space where the Earth's magnetic field does not protect them from cosmic rays. They will fly around the moon and return to Earth at a speed that will turn the atmosphere into a wall of plasma with a temperature of 10,000 degrees. And they will have no backup plan. This is the most dangerous crewed mission since the final flight of Apollo in 1972. It is perhaps the most dangerous mission humanity has ever undertaken. Here is why. The gravity hammer, escaping the well. To reach the moon, the Orion spacecraft must first break free from the gravitational grip of the Earth. This requires the Space Launch System rocket, the most powerful launch vehicle built since the Saturn V. The numbers sound abstract until you translate them into the reality of the human body. The rocket's launch mass is 2,600 tons. Its height is 98 meters, equivalent to a 32-story building. The total thrust at the moment of liftoff is 40 million newtons. To understand the scale, this is the equivalent of the lifting force of 4,000 passenger cars working simultaneously. At the moment of ignition for the 2 solid rocket boosters, 250 kilograms of chemical mixture burn inside each of them every single second. The temperature in the combustion chamber reaches 3,200 degrees Celsius, enough to melt titanium. The exhaust gases scream out of the nozzles at a speed of 2 kilometers 500 meters per second, 7 times faster than the speed of sound. The power of the rocket during the first 2 minutes of flight is approximately 190 gigawatts. To give you a sense of the scale, the world's largest hydroelectric power station generates 22 gigawatts. The Space Launch System is 9 times more powerful, but all that energy is consumed in 120 seconds, pushing metal and flesh into the sky against the planet's gravity. Now, imagine that you are inside this roaring pillar of fire. The first 6 seconds after the main engines ignite are marked by escalating vibration. You are lying on your back in a seat, secured by 5-point harnesses. The roar is transmitted through the spacecraft's hull as a physical wave, rattling your bones. Then the boosters kick in, and the acceleration surges to 1.5 G. Every kilogram of your body presses down on you with the force of 1.5 kilograms. Your head weighs 5 kilograms? Now it weighs 7.5 and is trying to crush your cervical vertebrae into the base of your skull. Your chest is compressed. Every breath requires effort. The diaphragm must lift not only itself but 1.5 times the weight of the lungs and organs. But this is only the beginning. At an altitude of 30 kilometers, 100 seconds after launch, acceleration reaches 4.5 G. Your heart works at its limit, trying to push blood up to the brain against a force 4.5 times greater than Earth's gravity. The blood becomes heavy. Arterial pressure in the leg skyrockets to 300 millimeters of mercury. In the head, it drops to 40. Tunnel vision begins. The periphery of your field of vision darkens. The retina is experiencing oxygen starvation. If the G-force continued for just 1 more minute, you would lose consciousness, but the designers know the limit. At the 480-second mark after launch, acceleration reaches its peak, 5.5 G. This is the maximum the human body can endure without losing consciousness, given the proper training and positioning. Your lungs are crushed. Your breathing is fast and shallow. Every word requires effort. Air must be forced through compressed vocal cords. Your face is deformed under its own weight. The skin sags. Your jaw feels as though it is filled with lead. And then, at the 510th second, the core stage separates.
Instant weightlessness.
Your stomach flies into your throat. Your vestibular system screams that you are falling, but you are not falling. You are in free flight. About half of all astronauts experience nausea in the first minutes of weightlessness. This is space adaptation syndrome, the cosmic version of motion sickness. But there is no time to adapt. In an hour and a half comes the translunar injection, the second fiery blow that will hurl the ship out of Earth's orbit toward the Moon. The ballistic loop, precision or death. Orion enters a circular parking orbit at an altitude of 185 kilometers. The spacecraft travels at a speed of 7 kilometers 700 meters per second, fast enough to circle the Earth in 90 minutes, but this is not enough to escape. To reach the Moon, it must accelerate by another 3 kilometers 200 meters per second. This is called delta V, the change in velocity, and this is exactly where the deadly mathematics begins. The interim cryogenic propulsion stage, powered by the RL-10 engine, ignites over the Pacific Ocean. A thrust of 110 kilonewtons pushes the ship for 18 minutes. The final velocity, 10 kilometers 900 meters per second. This is nearly the second cosmic velocity, the critical value at which an object permanently leaves Earth's gravitational grip. Nearly, but not quite, because the trajectory is designed with surgical precision. An elliptical orbit whose farthest point touches the Moon's orbit at a distance of 384,000 kilometers. If everything is calculated correctly, the Moon will be exactly there when Orion arrives after 4 days of flight. But here is the problem they don't mention in promotional videos. The precision of the translunar injection maneuver must be within plus or minus 10 meters per second in velocity and plus or minus 1/10 of a degree in direction. 10 meters per second is the speed of a good sprinter. Against the ship's total speed of 10,900 meters per second, the error seems negligible, less than 1/10 of 1%. However, at a distance of 384,000 kilometers, this tiny error transforms into a miss of 5 to 7,000 kilometers. The ship sails past the Moon. The satellite's gravity cannot capture it onto the correct free return trajectory. Orion enters a highly elongated elliptical orbit around the Earth with an apogee far beyond the lunar orbit. And here, the crew faces a terrifying reality. They have no lifeboat. In the Apollo missions, there was a lunar module, an autonomous spacecraft with its own engine, life support system, and power supply. When the Apollo 13 service module exploded in April 1970, the crew used the lunar module as a refuge and an engine to correct their trajectory. Without it, all three would have perished. Artemis II is a flyby mission. There is no landing on the Moon, and there is no lunar module. There is only the Orion capsule and the European service module. The only powerful engine is the AJ-10, with 26,700 newtons of thrust, located in the service module. If it fails, the crew has only 8 auxiliary orientation thrusters of 490 newtons each. The total thrust of the backup engines is 3,920 newtons. That is nearly 7 times less than the main engine. For a critical trajectory correction after missing the Moon, a velocity change of at least 50 to 100 meters per second is required. The main engine would accomplish this in 15 to 20 seconds. The auxiliary thrusters would take 5 to 7 minutes of continuous operation, burning through almost the entire fuel reserve. If the required correction exceeds 150 meters per second, which is entirely possible with a serious trajectory deviation, the fuel will not last. The ship misses the Earth on the return path. It enters a solar orbit. Oxygen, water, and food supplies will last for 21 days under a regime of strict rationing. The crew will die from carbon dioxide buildup or dehydration somewhere between the orbits of Earth and Venus. Their bodies will be mummified in the vacuum and the cold. The capsule will become a grave, orbiting the Sun for millions of years, a silent monument to human audacity and engineering error. This is not a theoretical danger. It is a real failure scenario documented in the mission files, and it has no solution other than one. The main engine must work. There is no alternative. Radiation storm, the invisible bullets of space. As the spacecraft travels toward the Moon, the crew is exposed to 2 types of radiation, each lethal in its own way. The first threat is galactic cosmic rays. This is the background radiation of the universe, constantly permeating space. The sources are supernova explosions, pulsars, and active galactic nuclei. These objects accelerate atomic nuclei to monstrous energies. A typical galactic cosmic ray particle is an iron nucleus containing 26 protons and 30 neutrons, moving at a speed of 280,000 kilometers per second. This is 93% of the speed of light. The energy of such a particle is about 10 gigaelectronvolts. To understand the scale, the kinetic energy of a single iron nucleus moving at this speed is equivalent to the energy of a flying 9mm caliber bullet, but compressed into a volume a billion times smaller. When such a particle passes through the human body, it pierces cells like a microscopic projectile. Along a trajectory 1 millimeter long through tissue, it creates about 100,000 ionizations, stripping electrons from atoms and generating free radicals. These radicals attack DNA molecules, creating breaks in the double helix. The dose from galactic cosmic rays in open space is about 0.5 millisievert per day. Over the 10 days of the Artemis II mission, the crew will receive between 150 and 300 millisieverts. This is the equivalent of 50 chest X-rays or 15 full-body CT scans. This will increase the lifetime risk of death from cancer by 2 to 3% for each crew member. This sounds acceptable, until the second threat occurs. Solar proton events are explosive ejections of charged particles from a sun. When magnetic field lines on the star's surface become twisted and suddenly snap, energy equivalent to billions of megatons in TNT equivalent is released. Protons are accelerated to energies of 100 to 500 megaelectronvolts and ejected into space in a directed stream. These particles move at speeds of 100 to 150,000 kilometers per second, 1/3 the speed of light. They reach the Moon's orbit 30 to 40 minutes after a flare. In August 1972, between the Apollo 16 and Apollo 17 missions, a powerful X-class solar flare occurred. The proton flux was so intense that an astronaut on the lunar surface in a spacesuit would have received a dose of about 400 millisieverts under the skin and 1 to 3 sieverts in the bone marrow within a few hours. 3 sieverts is an LD50 dose for 30 days. This means a 50% probability of death within 30 days, even with intensive medical care. Symptoms of acute radiation sickness begin in 2 to 3 hours. Uncontrollable vomiting, diarrhea, and dizziness in 4 to 7 days. Hair loss, destruction of mucous membranes, and bleeding in 2 to 3 weeks. Sepsis due to a destroyed immune system, internal bleeding, and multi-organ failure. And you are in a metal capsule 380,000 kilometers from the nearest hospital. But there is an even worse problem. It is called the shrapnel effect. Intuition suggests the thicker the ship's wall, the better the protection. But for high-energy cosmic rays, this is incorrect. When an iron nucleus with an energy of 10 gigaelectronvolts collides with an aluminum atom in the ship's 20 mm thick hull, nuclear fragmentation occurs. A single iron nucleus breaks into dozens of lighter fragments, silicon, magnesium, and oxygen nuclei, as well as free protons and neutrons. These fragments scatter in a cone inside the cabin. They penetrate through the remaining shielding and bombard the bodies of the crew members. Secondary radiation can be biologically more dangerous than the original particle because the fragments have a higher linear energy transfer. They inflict more DNA damage per unit of trajectory length through tissue. Ideal protection would require a thickness of 30 to 50 grams per square centimeter. That is 15 to 25 centimeters of aluminum or 7 to 12 centimeters of polyethylene. But this would add several tons of mass to the ship, making the mission impossible. NASA engineers chose a compromise: minimal baseline protection plus a localized shelter for emergency situations. The iron cocoon, 48 hours in hell. When the radiation detectors aboard Orion or the solar monitoring satellites register an X-class flare, the crew has between 20 and 30 minutes before the arrival of the proton storm. The command from Mission Control: Storm Shelter Protocol, immediate execution. The astronauts have 15 minutes to build an improvised stronghold that could save their lives. The central part of the Orion cabin, located between 2 rows of equipment lockers, is a space with a volume of about 2 cubic meters. For comparison, an old-fashioned phone booth takes up 1.5 cubic meters. A standard refrigerator is 7/10 of a cubic meter. The Artemis II shelter is effectively 2 large refrigerators into which 4 adults must squeeze. The crew begins to move everything dense available on board: 4 drinking water tanks, 25 liters each, totaling 100 kilograms. Water is an excellent radiation shield. Hydrogen atoms effectively slow down protons through elastic collisions. Containers of urine. By the 4th day of the mission, between 15 and 20 liters have accumulated. Urine is 95% water plus dissolved salts and organics. Every liter adds protection. Food rations with a total mass of about 40 kilograms. Canned food, freeze-dried products, energy bars, any mass matters. Soft gear, sleeping bags, spare clothing, packaging materials, to fill the gaps between the solid elements. The water tanks are stacked in layers around the central space, creating walls between 10 and 15 centimeters of water thick. This adds between 10 and 15 grams per square centimeter of extra shielding in critical directions from the side of the sun. The crew climbs inside. 4 bodies in a space of 2.5 cubic meters means 0.6 of a cubic meter per person, less than the volume of a coffin. Their positions are cramped, knees pulled to chests, arms pressed to the body. Weightlessness allows them to hang in any orientation, but psychologically, it is pure claustrophobia. They close the improvised panels. The lights are turned off to save battery power. Inside, there is almost total darkness, except for the dim glow of emergency indicators. The wait begins. The radiation detectors on the outer hull record a sharp spike in the dose rate, rising from 0.5 millisievert per day to 50 millisieverts per hour. Inside the shelter, thanks to the additional water shielding, between 10 and 15 millisieverts per hour. This is still dangerous, but not immediately lethal. If they stay inside the shelter for 48 hours, the total dose will be between 500 and 700 millisieverts. This increases the lifetime risk of cancer by 3 to 5%, but the probability of survival is nearly 100%. Outside the shelter, during those same 48 hours, the dose would have been between 2.5 and 3 sieverts, acute radiation sickness with a high probability of death. After 6 hours, the first signs of discomfort appear. In weightlessness, there is no such thing as a comfortable position. Muscles tense to hold the body in a specific configuration. Pain begins in the neck, back, and shoulders. The concentration of carbon dioxide slowly rises. The air purification system is working, but efficiency is reduced in the confined space. The carbon dioxide level rises to 0.6%. Lightheadedness appears, and breathing quickens. After 12 hours, the temperature inside the shelter reaches 28 degrees Celsius. Heat from 4 bodies accumulates due to limited air circulation. The crew is sweating. The sweat does not drip down. There is no gravity, but instead forms a sticky film on the skin. The smell becomes unbearable. A mixture of sweat, the sour tint of carbon dioxide in high concentrations, and food residues. Psychological tension mounts. For people in the dark, heat, and stench, with no way to move. The slightest sound, a neighbor's breathing, an accidental touch, triggers a flash of irritation. After 24 hours, halfway through, muscle pain turns into cramps. The concentration of carbon dioxide reaches 0.8%. This causes noticeable cognitive effects, slowed reactions, difficulty concentrating, and a slight euphoria. Hypercapnia acts as a mild narcotic. After 36 hours, the crew falls into a state between sleeping and waking. Proper sleep is impossible. It is too cramped and uncomfortable, but the brain periodically shuts down for 5 to 10 minutes. Hallucinations appear. One astronaut hears the voice of a home radio station from childhood. Another sees flashes of light, phosphenes caused by cosmic radiation passing through the retina. These are normal phenomena during prolonged exposure to radiation, but they are frightening. After 48 hours, the sensors show a decline in the intensity of the solar storm. The dose rate falls to the background level of 0.5 millisievert per day. The command from Mission Control: storm clear, exit the shelter. The crew slowly crawls out of the cocoon. Their bodies are stiff, and coordination of movement is impaired due to prolonged hypercapnia and dehydration. One of the astronauts experiences a bout of nausea, space adaptation syndrome exacerbated by stress. But they are alive. They have survived what would have killed an unprotected person in a matter of hours. The shadow of the moon, 18 hours of cold. On the 5th day of the mission, the Orion spacecraft enters the shadow of the moon on the far side of the satellite. Sunlight vanishes instantly. The solar panels of the European service module stop generating power. 11,200 watts of electricity disappear. The ship switches to battery power, a reserve designed for 12 hours under full load or 18 hours under a regime of strict economy. The temperature of the outer hull begins to plummet. Solar heating, which provided about 13.5 kilowatts of thermal power, has ceased. The radiators of the thermal control system continue to emit heat into space but receive no compensation. After 30 minutes, the radiator temperature drops to minus 50 degrees Celsius. The ammonia in the cooling loop approaches its freezing point of minus 77 degrees. The automation reduces the circulation speed to prevent the formation of ice crystals that would rupture the tubes. After 2 hours, the outer hull temperature reaches minus 100 degrees. Inside the cabin, the temperature falls from 22 to 18 degrees. Thermal control systems are still operating, but their efficiency is declining due to power-saving measures. The crew begins to shut down secondary equipment, cameras, most of the displays, and lighting. Only life support systems, navigation, and communications remain active. After 6 hours, the cabin temperature drops to 10 degrees Celsius. The astronauts put on every layer of clothing available on board. The battery charge drops to 35%. 12 hours remain until they exit the shadow. After 10 hours, it is only 6 degrees above zero inside the ship. The crew is shivering despite 3 layers of clothing. Metabolism increases. The body attempts to generate heat through muscular shivering, but this requires more oxygen. The breathing rate rises. The concentration of carbon dioxide increases because the purification system is running at minimum power to save energy. Battery charge, 15%. The remaining energy will last for 2 to 3 hours maximum. Condensation appears on cold surfaces, walls and windows. Water droplets do not run down but instead float in weightlessness. The crew collects them with towels because water entering electronic blocks would cause a short circuit. After 15 hours, the temperature drops to 3 degrees Celsius. One crew member, the woman with the lowest body mass, begins to show signs of mild hypothermia, slurred speech, slowed reactions, and lethargic thinking. The other 3 embrace her, sharing the warmth of their own bodies. It is a primitive method, but effective. 4 people huddle into a tight group, like penguins in an Antarctic storm. The batteries show 5% charge. This is a critical level. If the exit from the shadow is delayed by even 1 more hour, life support systems will begin to shut down. Air circulation pumps will stop. Carbon dioxide will begin to accumulate in localized zones. The concentration will reach 2%, then 5%. At 10%, loss of consciousness will occur in a matter of minutes. After 17 hours and 45 minutes, the first ray of sunlight touches the edge of the solar panels. Power generation is restored, initially about 1 kilowatt, then more as the ship emerges from a shadow. The batteries stop discharging. Slow charging begins. After 18 hours, the ship is fully in the light. The solar panels generate their full power of 11,200 watts. The radiators begin to warm up. The ammonia in the loop thaws and resumes circulation. The temperature inside the cabin slowly rises. 5 degrees, 10, 18, 22. The crew survived, but it was on the brink of catastrophe. Fiery ricochet, returning through plasma. Day 10 of the mission. The Orion spacecraft approaches Earth. Its velocity relative to the planet is 11 kilometers per second. That is 39,600 kilometers per hour. The kinetic energy of the 9-ton capsule after the separation of the service module is 544 gigajoules. This is equivalent to the explosion of 130 tons of TNT or a low-yield tactical nuclear warhead. All this energy must be dissipated in 20 minutes by converting it into heat. Otherwise, the ship and the crew will vaporize. At an altitude of 120 kilometers, the capsule touches the upper boundary of the atmosphere. The air density here is only 1/millionth of a gram per cubic centimeter, 1,000,000 times thinner than at sea level, but at a speed of 11 kilometers per second, even this creates resistance. The air molecules in front of the heat shield do not have time to move out of the way. The speed of sound in air is 300 meters per second. The ship is moving 37 times faster than sound. The air compresses in front of the shield, forming a shock wave. Behind the shock wave front, the pressure skyrockets 100-fold. The temperature rises to 8 to 11,000 degrees Kelvin. This is higher than the surface temperature of the Sun, which is 5,800 degrees. At such temperatures, nitrogen and oxygen molecules break apart into atoms. The atoms ionize, losing electrons. Plasma is formed, the fourth state of matter, a mixture of ions and free electrons. This plasma glows brighter than the sun in the visible spectrum. If you were watching from Earth, you would see a fireball leaving a glowing trail several kilometers long. A direct ballistic descent, where the capsule enters the atmosphere at a steep angle and breaks in one pass, would create a peak G-force of 30 to 40 G. This is lethal for a human. At 20 G, blood cannot circulate. The heart stops. Death occurs from circulatory arrest. The solution from NASA engineers is the skip entry maneuver. The capsule enters at a shallow angle of about 6.5 degrees to the horizon. Aerodynamic drag begins to slow the ship, but simultaneously, the asymmetrical shape of the heat shield creates lift. At an altitude of 60 kilometers, the lift pushes the capsule back up into the thinner layers of the atmosphere. This is similar to a stone skipping across the surface of the water. During the first immersion at altitudes between 40 and 60 kilometers, the speed drops from 11 kilometers per second to 8. The peak acceleration is 4 2/10 G. The temperature of the heat shield reaches 2,200 degrees Celsius. The ricochet, ascend to an altitude of 90 kilometers. The ship is back in the vacuum. The speed is 8 kilometers per second. The second immersion at altitudes between 30 and 50 kilometers. The speed drops from 8 to 5 kilometers per second. The peak acceleration is 3 8/10 G. The temperature of the heat shield reaches its maximum, 2,800 degrees Celsius. The heat shield made of AVCOAT material begins to decompose at temperatures above 1,500 degrees. Organic compounds in the material undergo pyrolysis, breaking into simpler molecules and releasing gases, carbon dioxide, water vapor, and hydrocarbons. These gases exit through the porous structure of the material, creating a protective layer of cooler gas between the plasma and the solid surface of the shield. Simultaneously, evaporation absorbs a colossal amount of heat. The shield surface chars, turning into a layer of carbonaceous coal 1 to 2 centimeters thick. This layer is gradually carried away by the flow of incandescent gas. During one entry into the atmosphere at lunar speed, the shield loses from 3 to 4 centimeters of thickness on the frontal part. However, the temperature on the inner side of the shield, facing the cabin, does not exceed 150 degrees Celsius. The crew is protected. At the peak of heating at an altitude of about 50 kilometers, the ship is surrounded by plasma with a temperature of 8,000 degrees and higher. Plasma is an ionized gas that reflects and absorbs radio waves. All radio communication is cut off. This phenomenon is called blackout, radio silence. For the Orion capsule, the blackout lasts from 6 to 7 minutes. Mission Control in Houston sees the last telemetry at an altitude of about 65 kilometers. Then, silence. The crew is completely isolated from Earth. If something goes wrong during these 6 minutes, a parachute system failure, a structural defect in the heat shield, or an error in orientation control, specialists on Earth will only find out after the fact, when the ship either emerges from the blackout or does not emerge at all. For the crew, these are the longest minutes of the mission. A load of 4G presses them into their seats. Every kilogram of their body weighs 4 kilograms. Breathing is difficult. The chest is compressed by the weight of the lungs and organs. The temperature inside the cabin rises to 42 degrees Celsius despite the thermal insulation. Infrared radiation from the red-hot shield penetrates through the multi-layer protection. Sweat appears on the skin but does not run off. The gravity is not yet sufficient. It forms a sticky film, hindering thermoregulation. Outside the windows is the roaring orange-white glow of the plasma. The noise of the shockwave is transmitted through the hull as a low-frequency howl with a power of 130 decibels. This is the sound level of a jet engine at a distance of 15 meters. And the astronauts can do nothing but lie there, clenching their teeth, and wait. At an altitude of 20 kilometers, the speed drops to 1,000 kilometers per hour. The plasma temperature falls, ionization ceases, radio communication is restored. A voice from Mission Control. Orion, Houston, we have you, welcome back. The crew is alive. At an altitude of 7,600 meters, the parachute bay covers are jettisoned. 2 drogue parachutes, each 7 meters in diameter, are deployed. Their task is to stabilize the capsule and reduce the speed to 160 kilometers per hour. At an altitude of 3,000 meters, the drogue parachutes detach. 3 main parachutes, each 35 meters in diameter, are fired out. The total area of the canopies is 2,900 square meters, nearly half a football field. Upon deployment, the capsule experiences a sharp G-force of 3 to 4 G for 2 to 3 seconds. The crew is pressed into their seats again, but now in the opposite direction. The braking force acts upward. The system is designed so that 2 out of the 3 parachutes can ensure a safe landing. The impact velocity with 2 parachutes is about 10 meters per second instead of 7 with all 3. This is a harder landing, but survivable. If 2 parachutes fail, the impact velocity will rise to 25 meters per second. This results in a hard landing with a high probability of fractures and internal injuries, but survivability is around 70 to 80%. If all 3 fail, the impact velocity is 150 meters per second. Death is instantaneous. At an altitude of 300 meters, the automation jettisons the heat shield. It is no longer needed and adds 900 kilograms of dead weight. The underside with shock-absorbing cushions opens beneath the capsule. Splashdown in the Pacific Ocean. Velocity is 7 to 8 meters per second. This is the equivalent of falling from a height of 3 meters. The capsule hits the water surface with the force of an impact. The crew experiences a sharp G-load of 10 to 15 G for a fraction of a second. The seats cushion the blow, but it feels like a powerful jolt to the entire body. The capsule floats. 3 positions are possible, upright or 2 inverted ones. If the capsule ends up upside down, balloons automatically inflate to flip it to the correct position within 3 to 5 minutes. United States Navy helicopters are already flying toward the splashdown point. The crew is alive. They have returned from a place where no humans have been for 50 years. They survived radiation, cold, heat, G-forces, and a fiery return through the atmosphere. The Artemis II mission is complete. It was not a stroll. It was 10 days of continuous struggle for survival in an environment designed by the universe to destroy human life. And 4 people prove that we can survive where we are not meant to be. This is the true face of space exploration. Not romance, but the harsh mathematics of survival. And this is only the beginning of the journey to Mars.